Hello everyone, it's time, actually a little bit past time. I'm running slightly behind, but that's okay. For the April catch-all, the list of what else I saw last month that I didn't do a solo review on, we'll get started at movie number 1 with 2010's The Debt. This is a film about 3 Mossad agents who sneak into East Berlin to capture a Nazi war criminal who's living there in secret. The movie, which is a remake of a 2007 Israeli film, has the story jump back and forth between 2 time periods. The setup and execution of the mission in the 60s, where the agents are played by Jessica Chastain, Sam Worthington, and Martin Chokash, and the aftermath 30 years later, where the same characters are played by Helen Mirren, Kieran Hines, and Tom Wilkinson. It's an engaging action thriller and very well acted. You have to pay attention, though. With the story unfolding concurrently in 2 separate decades, certain scenes playing out of sequence or replaying after we've been given new information, and with actors who don't necessarily resemble each other playing the same role, it can get confusing. I managed to hold on pretty well. It helps if you latch onto the characters' names from the start, but I watched it with a party of 3, and of the 3 of us, 1 was confused, 1 was not, and 1 had seen the movie before. But I think a little potential confusion is worth it. I enjoyed the film. The second one is one that came out pretty recently, although, now that I think about it, it wasn't that recent. It's a 2018 film. We're already into May. It's been on my watch list at the library for a while, so time is getting away from me. It's 2018's Christopher Robin, in which Ewan McGregor stars as A.A. Milne's little boy from the Winnie the Pooh series, all grown up. He's gotten caught in a dreary day-to-day cycle at a soul-sucking job that's taking him away from his wife and daughter and making him forget the magic and sense of wonder he had as a child. All these years, Pooh's been waiting patiently for him to come back to the 100-acre wood, and then suddenly one day, by accident, Pooh crosses over into Christopher Robin's world. And of course, chaos ensues. As you can imagine, there's a lot of sweetness in this movie, some charming humor, a fairly predictable but still nice message, but oof, is it bleak. I expected a certain amount of sadness, but it took nearly an hour for things to brighten up. I found this movie in the kids section at my library. I just can't picture children enjoying this movie. Maybe I'm wrong? It does get better in the second half. McGregor does a good job, especially when you consider that his heartfelt performance is probably done solo. He's not really interacting with those stuffed animals. The special effects are good though, and it's uncanny how well the voice actors mimic the voices from the old cartoons. I suppose when you compare the tone in the second half to the tone in the first half, some of the humor is a little too silly and throws off the balance. But after the heaviness of the first hour, I gladly accepted an overdose of levity. Movie number 3 is 1953's The Hitch-Hiker. Finally! I have wanted to see this movie for such a long time, at least 10 years. I don't know why I haven't gotten around to it before now. It's been a priority. Anyway, this is a really good movie, as I suspected it would be. I've been hearing about it for years. Directed by classic film star turned director Ida Lupino, who also co-wrote the screenplay, which according to the opening titles is based on a true story. That's not too hard to believe, is it? 2 buddies, played by Edmund O'Brien and Frank Lovejoy, are driving through Mexico for a weekend fishing trip when they pick up a hitchhiker, played by William Tallman, unaware that he's left a trail of bodies behind him. The situation quickly turns into a nightmare. This one's short and snappy, with fine performances all around. Even though the bulk of the movie is just 3 guys in a car, it's a real thriller, and the hitchhiker was a more diabolical character than I expected for a 1953 film. The moral of the story, which I would hope everyone already knows, never pick up a hitchhiker. He might turn out to be a homicidal maniac. Movie number 4 is a 1952 film, lots of 1950s movies on this list, purely coincidental, called Hunted. It also goes by the alternate title The Stranger in Between, but I personally prefer Hunted. Dirk Bogarde stars as a man who's just committed murder and is caught immediately after the act by a 6-year-old boy who's running away from home because he set the kitchen curtains on fire. Afraid he'll be a witness against him, Bogarde drags the kid along when he goes on the run. But while initially the boy is an irritation and Bogarde treats him roughly, he didn't want to get saddled with a kid after all, they gradually become companions who depend on each other and like each other's company, who honestly might be better off together than with other people. It's a super bittersweet movie, and definitely one where you end up rooting for the fugitives to get away. The little boy, played by Scottish-born child star John Whiteley in his film debut, is really cute. It's kinda hard to understand his lines at times, either because of his age, or his accent, or the sound quality, but he did a very good job, as did Bogard. I really liked this one. Movie number 5 is Operation Amsterdam from 1959. Told you. This one's an interesting little World War II film about 3 men, 2 Dutch, 1 British, played by Peter Finch, Alexander Knox, and Tony Britton, who go into the Netherlands to sneak out as many diamonds as they can before the Germans invade and get their hands on them. But when they arrive, the invasion's already in progress, and it's nearly impossible to tell who's a German and who's a Dutch officer when Germans may be wearing Dutch uniforms. There are a couple intense sequences in this one, made even more exciting because there's a countdown element, and the action's quite good. Movie number 6 is The Meg, which was last summer's giant prehistoric shark movie. Meg is short for Megalodon, based on the book by Steve Alten and starring Jason Statham. This one wasn't as dumb as I expected. Maybe that's not the best thing to say about a movie, but these days, that's pretty much a compliment. Granted, my expectations were very low, but it's true. I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I would. It's got a clean 3-act structure, a creepy deep ocean setting for at least part of it, a big scary sea monster ×2, actually ×3 if you count the giant squid, enough comic relief that was actually funny to make up for the comic relief that wasn't, something that a lot of movies struggle with nowadays, and several characters who are either compelling or relatable. I'm not saying it's a masterpiece, it's not Jaws, but it did what it needed to do and I was entertained, and I got the feeling the cast was having fun with it too. And when that's evident, that can make the movie a lot more fun to watch. Movie number 7 is 1958's Man of the West, which stars Gary Cooper as a reformed outlaw heading out of town to hire a school teacher when he crosses paths with his old band led by his uncle, who urges him to rejoin them. This movie was directed by Anthony Mann, who made a lot of famous westerns, but this is the first Anthony Mann western I've seen. By all accounts, this role was supposed to be Jimmy Stewart's, but Cooper does a fine job with it. Just how many times did Gary Cooper play a man who's resolved not to kill anyone? 4? There's 4 that I can think of. There's this one, Man of the West, Sergeant York, which is a great movie by the way, Friendly Persuasion, High Noon, he's resolved not to kill anyone anymore, right? Because he's marrying Grace Kelly, who's a Quaker. That's kind of an oddly specific thing to get typecast as. This one's a pretty grim movie, in spite of a deceptively humorous beginning. The band of outlaws is more like a band of sickos. That Cooper's character was ever one of them is kind of hard to believe, unless he was the one decent member of the group. It's funny that Lee J. Cobb's playing his crazy old uncle, yet he's 10 years younger than Cooper. It's got a couple uncomfortable moments which make it feel very long, and which would probably have been even more uncomfortable if the movie were made today versus in the 50s. I didn't always love the experience of watching it, but it was a good movie. Oh, there's one other funny thing. Gary Cooper's co-star is Julie London, who's a singer, and in the film, she plays a singer who's leaving town. And all of the posters that I saw advertise that she'll sing the song Man of the West, but she doesn't. I don't think she sang a single note in the whole movie, unless I missed it. Movie number 8 is an ocean liner disaster film from 1960 called The Last Voyage, about a cruise ship that's already on its last legs when trouble starts in the engine room, leading to a boiler explosion. Its cast includes Robert Stack as a man trying to get his family off the ship, Dorothy Malone as his wife who's trapped in their room, George Sanders as the captain who sees sending out an SOS and ordering passengers to the lifeboats as a last resort, Edmund O'Brien as the crusty chief engineer who's been saying all along that the ship's got problems, and Woody Strode as the only guy on the ship who's sympathetic to Robert Stack's plight and does everything he can to help. This movie predates the Irwin Allen era of disaster flicks by about a decade. It doesn't have quite that level of flair or the packed cast, and of course it's not as polished as later disaster films would be. The characters aren't very developed either, but I don't mind that because the script, jumping around from bridge to boiler room to Robert Stack's family, keeps things moving, and I don't care for an excess of personal drama in my disaster movies anyway. It has a couple very strong scenes, in particular Dorothy Malone's desperate moments when she feels her situation is hopeless and seeks an alternative solution. The only thing I really didn't like was the occasional narration from the third officer, played by Joel Marston, describing things that I could observe perfectly well for myself. That's one of the beauties of the visual medium. You can show your audience something without having to describe it to them. So this narration became an annoyance for me. But if you want an opposing opinion on that, my mom didn't mind it at all. Anyway, if you like disaster movies as we do, you'd probably find this interesting. Movie number 9 is Hunter Killer, a 2018 film that I thought felt a little bit more like a 90s film. The plot's kind of a complicated one to summarize in a line or two, so I'll just say it's an action movie in which a sub-commander, played by Gerard Butler, goes into foreign waters to investigate what happened to another American sub that was shadowing a Russian sub and disappeared, and he ends up teaming up with Navy SEALs to get involved in a Russian conflict. It will never not be humorous to me that incredibly Scottish Gerard Butler is getting these American action movie star parts now. He's selling it, though. I don't think his accent in this movie gives him away at all. Other non-Americans playing lead American characters in the movie are Gary Oldman, who's not in it a lot considering he gets second billing and is heavily featured on the poster, and Toby Stephens, who was in it a lot more than Oldman was and isn't featured on the poster at all. I'd heard a report that this movie was dumb, but I thought it was alright. We all did. Maybe we like dumb movies here, or maybe it wasn't actually that dumb, or maybe some of us make more allowances when it comes to a sub-movie. My chief criticisms are that it's a little long, it's got some awfully convenient plot twists and last-minute rescues, it's got a cheesy moment or two, and I had some confusion over when it was set. There was definitely a period during which I was like, wait, was there an indication that this movie is set during the tail end of the Cold War and I missed it? But again, I thought it was fine. Entertaining. And lastly, movie number 10 is 1941's Blossoms in the Dust, a biopic starring Greer Garson as Edna Gladney, who became a champion for orphaned and unwanted children. This is another one that I'd wanted to see for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. It's a sweet, inspiring movie. Greer Garson is as lovely as always and looks glorious in Technicolor. These images I'm showing you probably don't do the movie justice. There are also good supporting performances from Walter Pidgeon. It's always fun when he and Garson are paired up, and this was their first of 8 films together. Also from Felix Bressert and Marcia Hunt. My biggest complaint, which is a minor one, is that the music's a little heavy-handed, at times feeling less like a score and more like a string of familiar melodies woven together to invoke certain feelings. I'm used to this kind of thing in old movies. It happens a lot, particularly in wartime films, but it seemed especially obvious and corny here, to the point that it became distracting. But on the whole, it didn't take away from the movie. The performances are really good, especially Garson's, and there are lots of big names behind the camera too. Direction by Mervyn LeRoy, cinematography by Carl Freund, gowns by Adrian. It's certainly a treat for the eyes, and whenever Garson speaks, a treat for the ears as well. This one's a tearjerker, so if you check it out, keep a tissue handy just in case. Alright, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this monthly movie mash for April 2019. Let me know your thoughts on any of the movies that I mentioned in the comments down below if you like, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.